Welcome to Told in Stone. I'm Dr. Garrett Ryan. Today we're discussing Roman apartments, what they were like, how much they cost, and how they were rented and managed. As we'll see, apartments in ancient Rome were as expensive as anything in modern New York, and much more dangerous. The vast majority of Rome's million or so inhabitants lived in the apartment buildings known as insulae. According to one ancient count, there were no fewer than 46,602 insulae in Rome, and only 1,790 private homes. Like modern apartments, insulae ranged in quality from luxurious to squalid. The best units were rented by senators and wealthy freedmen. As a young man, the future dictator Sulla lived in an apartment, and even after he became emperor, Augustus sometimes slept in the apartments of his freedmen. On the other end of the scale, the migrant workers who flooded into Rome during the summer lived in cell-like rooms stacked on the roofs of ramshackle tenements. The ground floor of an insula was normally reserved for shops. In a world without elevators or reliable plumbing, the most desirable apartments were directly above. The cheaper units were higher up, sometimes much higher. Although the emperors limited the maximum height of apartment buildings to 70 and later 60 Roman feet, these regulations seem to have been honored in the breach. One apartment building, the Insula Follicula, was so tall that it became a tourist attraction. Virtually all of Rome's insulae have disappeared, but dozens survive in Ostia, the port at the mouth of the Tiber. Most of Ostia's insulae date to the 2nd century and were built, like the Pantheon and the markets of Trajan, of brick-faced concrete. Their interiors were divided into apartments of varying size. The standard layout was centered on a hall-like room known as the Medianum, with spaces used for dining or entertaining at either end. One wall of the Medianum had windows facing a street or courtyard. A series of small, usually windowless bedrooms opened from the opposite side. The bedrooms of Roman apartments don't seem to have been very comfortable, nor, to judge from this carbonized example in Herculaneum, were Roman beds. That's because the Romans didn't have Helix mattresses. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses and bedding customized to fit your needs. After taking a sleep quiz that matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress, Helix will recommend one of 20 unique models. In my case, since I'm a side sleeper who prefers a medium mattress, the Midnight Luxe. Helix offers free shipping anywhere in the US and delivers right to your door. My mattress arrived a few days after I ordered it. The mattress was easy to set up. All I had to do was take it out of the box, remove the wrap, and unroll it. When I tried the mattress, I found it had just the balance of comfort and firmness I was looking for. Helix has a 100-night sleep trial, so I have more than 3 months to be sure that this is the right mattress for me. And since Helix mattresses come with a 10-year warranty, I can rest easy for a long time. Helix offers financing options and flexible payment, and this month only, Told in Stone fans receive an exclusive discount: 27% off your mattress purchase, plus 2 free pillows. Use the promo code HelixPartner27 to take advantage of this special offer. Check out the Helix site for more details. Welcome back. Perhaps the most remarkable apartment buildings in Ostia are the so-called garden houses, built during the reign of Hadrian. This luxurious residential complex consisted of 2 buildings, probably 4 stories high, at the center of a landscaped courtyard ringed by shops and other apartments. 4 identical units occupied each floor of the central buildings. They followed the usual Medianum-centered plan, but on a grand scale. Their reception rooms were 2 stories tall, with a double row of windows. Over the other rooms was a mezzanine that likely housed storage spaces and slave quarters. Including this level, a single apartment could easily have 15 or 20 rooms. Many insulae in Ostia were decorated with mosaics and frescoes. Although their windows were usually closed only with wooden shutters, some had panes of glass or selenite. Apartments on upper stories might be provided with wooden balconies. In some cases, entire floors were jettied out to maximize space. The poet Martial claimed that apartment dwellers could shake hands across Rome's streets. The vast majority of apartments had no plumbing, forcing their inhabitants to draw water from public fountains or pay carriers to do it for them. At least the lower floors of some insulae in Ostia, however, were connected by lead pipes to the local aqueduct. Likewise, though most apartment dwellers deposited human waste in chamber pots, emptied from the nearest convenient window, a few Ostia units had private latrines, situated as far as possible from the main living area to minimize odors. Insulae were frequently built by wealthy speculators. Often, entire apartment blocks were leased to investors, who then sublet the individual units. The property was managed by a slave or freedman known as the insularius. Like a modern superintendent, the insularius was responsible for basic upkeep and repairs. He also collected the rent, which was due once a year, normally on July 1st. We know from graffiti in Pompeii that apartments were advertised with painted inscriptions. Anyone interested in the quality apartments of the Insula Ariana Poliana, for example, could contact Primus, the slave of a prominent Pompeian aristocrat. Whatever the rents were in the Insula Ariana, we can be sure that they were more reasonable than those in Rome, where even modest apartments often cost 2,000 sestertii a year, roughly double the average income of a laborer. High-end units were correspondingly pricey. One of Cicero's clients paid an annual rent of 30,000 sestertii for a third-floor apartment. To judge from our literary sources, living conditions in most Roman insulae were less than opulent. Juvenal imagines a hapless insula dweller cramped under the roof tiles with a tiny bed, a few knickknacks, and a basket of mouse-eaten scrolls. Martial, who lived in a third-floor apartment on the Quirinal Hill, complained of the street noise that cascaded through his windows. So did Seneca, who had the misfortune of living directly over a bath. Noise was far from the only hazard. Insulae were often poorly maintained and had an unnerving habit of collapsing. Cicero, who seems to have been something of a slumlord, notes in a letter that one of his properties was falling into ruin and all the tenants had fled. The greatest danger was fire. Although their walls were usually masonry, the floors, partitions, and penthouses of insulae were made of wood. Since Rome's firefighters were unable to pump water into the upper stories of tall apartment buildings, a stray coal or dropped lamp often destroyed an entire block. The problem was so pervasive that prudent investors hesitated before sinking money into the profitable but flammable Roman real estate market. There was, finally, the risk of eviction. Anyone who failed to pay their rent on time was unceremoniously expelled. Martial describes watching a freshly evicted family trudge down the street, heading for one of the bridges that sheltered Rome's homeless. As Rome's population shrank in late antiquity, the insulae began to empty. At Ostia, aristocrats converted vacant apartment buildings into lavish summer homes, but soon even these were abandoned. Of the tens of thousands of insulae that lined Rome's streets in late antiquity, only one is visible today. It stands, still half buried, on the slopes of the Capitoline Hill. 5 of its stories are preserved: tenements over apartments, apartments over shops, all looming invisibly over the buried streets of ancient Rome. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to check out my new series, Roman Review, and the other exciting benefits recently added to my Patreon, follow the link on screen. Thanks for watching.